alone at night. Your phone is silent. No texts, no notifications, no little dopamine hits to trick your brain into thinking you're loved. Terrifying, right? Wrong. That's not loneliness, that's freedom knocking at your door. But instead of answering, you panic. You open Tinder. You scroll through Instagram couples kissing under fake sunsets. You settle for half love just to mute the sound of your own thoughts. Pathetic. You see, the modern world has sold you this Disney-level scam. Find someone, get married, grow old, die holding hands. Sounds poetic until you realize what you actually signed up for. Compromise, emotional babysitting, and slowly erasing yourself to keep the peace. Society calls it love. I call it a hostage situation with flower arrangements. And let's be brutally honest, most of you aren't in love. You're just afraid of facing yourself without a distraction. That's all. You think your relationship is sacred? Strip away the cuddles and shared Netflix passwords, and what's left? A glorified emotional support system designed to protect you from your own mind. You cling to someone not because they're your soulmate, but because silence terrifies you. The quiet at night, the absence of validation, the confrontation with your inner emptiness, that's what sends you into dating apps faster than you can say, it's complicated. And here's the joke. You'd rather die suffocating in a lukewarm marriage than admit you're terrified of eating dinner alone. But guess what? Solitude isn't your enemy. It's your only shot at becoming a real human being instead of a half-baked version of yourself molded around someone else's expectations. I don't care how many Instagram captions scream, "Find someone who completes you." No, if you need completing, you're not a partner. You're a puzzle missing half the pieces. Staying single is terrifying only if you've mistaken codependency for love. And most of you have. Because let's face it, couples aren't built on intimacy, they're built on silent compromises, suppressed desires, and quiet resentment over who left the dishes in the sink. Every happy selfie hides a graveyard of dreams buried to keep harmony intact. You call it maturity. I call it self-betrayal. That time you killed your passion project because it took too much time away from the relationship. That opinion you swallowed to avoid conflict. That part of you that wanted more, but kept shrinking to fit into the polite little box called us. Slowly, piece by piece, you disappear. And one day you wake up with someone who doesn't even know you, because you don't know you. But of course, society cheers. Look at them, what a lovely couple, so stable, so normal. Translation, congratulations, you successfully anesthetized yourself with predictability. The cage is golden, the bar is polished, but it's still a cage. And you call that love? Please, that's emotional taxidermy. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying love is evil. I'm saying the way you practice it is pathetic. You don't love, you cling. You don't connect, you fuse. You don't share lives, you merge into one beige, domesticated identity with matching pajamas. And then you dare call it destiny? How adorable. The truth? The most radical act of self-love is to stay single long enough to actually know who the hell you are. To face your thoughts without distraction, to embrace the silence until it screams truths you can't ignore. That's individuation. That's real freedom. But no, you run from it because society whispers, you'll end up alone. Nobody is happy without a partner. Wrong again. People aren't miserable because they're single. They're miserable because they sold their souls for validation. They confuse attachment with affection, survival pacts with intimacy, routine with stability. And then they wonder why they feel half dead by 40. Here's a thought. Maybe you don't need to find the one. Maybe you need to become someone no one could ever replace. Radical, I know, but that's the part your cheesy romance movies never told you. The biggest betrayal isn't being dumped. It's abandoning yourself to avoid being alone. So, next time you panic because nobody texted back, don't see it as rejection. See it as a sacred opportunity.
That silence you dread, that's your invitation to finally meet the only person who matters, you. Ah, marriage, society's favorite fairy tale. The glossy Instagram photos, the wedding hashtags, the champagne toasts. Everyone claps, everyone smiles, everyone pretends that two people just signed a cosmic contract. Reality check, they signed a mortgage, a lifetime of compromises, and a slow, symbolic funeral for their individuality. Congratulations. You think marriage is sacred? Look closer. Behind every perfect couple, there's a graveyard of swallowed dreams. That novel you never wrote because your partner thought it was impractical. That hobby you gave up because it took too much time. That opinion you silenced to keep dinner peaceful. Bit by bit, your essence gets traded for stability, and society applauds you for it. They say love requires sacrifice. What they don't tell you is that the sacrifice is always yourself. You bend, you shrink, you soften your edges, you cut your desires into digestible pieces. And for what? To maintain an emotional ceasefire with someone who's just as terrified of solitude as you are. That's not love. It's a hostage negotiation disguised as partnership. Couples love to brag about their peace. Oh, the endless compromises, the routines, the shared playlists. But peek under the surface, and you'll find silences loaded with resentment, endless micro-betrayals, and a constant performance of stability. Stability looks good on Instagram, but it kills the creative fire. You don't build masterpieces in rooms filled with endless negotiations about where to eat dinner. And don't feed me that line about growing together. Most of you aren't growing, you're pruning, cutting away parts of yourself until you fit neatly into the relationship box. Then you wonder why your soul feels numb, why your nights feel hollow, why your creativity has dried up. Newsflash, it's because you traded your chaos, the one thing that makes you alive, for predictability. The truth is brutal. Romantic love, as society sells it, is not about intimacy. It's about control. It's about taming, domesticating, making you palatable. Society doesn't want individuals, it wants couples, because couples are predictable. Couples buy houses, plan vacations, attend barbecues. They keep the machine running. But the individual, the one who dares to stay single, terrifies them. Because a free person is dangerous. You can't control someone who doesn't need your validation. And here's the dirty little secret. Most people don't want love. They want anesthesia. They want someone to shield them from silence, someone to validate their existence, someone to keep them too distracted to notice their own emptiness. That's why they cling. That's why they fear solitude more than death. Because solitude unmasks them. Alone, they can't hide behind affection or small talk. Alone, they have to face themselves, and most people would rather die than do that. So they marry, they merge, they post couple selfies captioned soulmates, and slowly, they disappear. Not dramatically, not with a bang, quietly, invisibly, death by compromise. Let me say it plainly. Staying single is not a curse. It's the most radical act of freedom you can commit in a world that worships codependency. To stay single is to refuse to be domesticated. It's to say, I'd rather confront my demons head-on than bury them under shared Netflix accounts and half-hearted sex on Sunday nights. Does it scare people? Of course, because your freedom exposes their cage. Your solitude makes their compromises look pathetic. So they call you selfish. They call you incomplete. They whisper, he'll end up alone, or she's just bitter. What they really mean is, your courage makes me uncomfortable. But tell me, what's worse? Dying alone in your truth or living together in a beautifully decorated lie? Society doesn't want you to ask that question. That's why it keeps selling you the fairy tale, the ring, the wedding photos. Because if too many of you chose freedom, the whole illusion would collapse. So here's my challenge. Stop buying the myth. Stop treating relationships as your ticket to completeness. Stop calling dependence love.
Staying single isn't failure. It's the refusal to betray yourself. It's a declaration of war against mediocrity, against conformity, against the soul-killing machine of polite domesticity. Because the truth is this, love is not supposed to make you smaller. If it does, it isn't love. It's a slow execution. And if staying single is what it takes to keep your fire alive, then loneliness isn't loneliness, it's liberation. Let's drop the polite nonsense. Solitude, yes, that scary word people treat like it's a disease, isn't your enemy. It's your last chance at honesty. Society has spent centuries brainwashing you into believing that being single is some kind of personal failure. Oh, she's still single at 35? Poor thing. He never got married. Something must be wrong with him. No, Karen. Maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe everything is finally right. Let me tell you, the real disease isn't solitude. It's dependence. It's living your life like an emotional parasite, terrified of your own silence. Most of you don't love. You cling. You grab the nearest warm body and declare them soulmate just to avoid sitting alone with your thoughts. You call it romance, but really it's subsidized therapy with bad sex and shared Netflix passwords. Here's the thing. Solitude doesn't kill you. It reveals you. That's why most of you run. Alone, there's no partner to project your insecurities onto, no one to carry your emotional baggage. Just you, naked in the mirror of your own consciousness. And God, you can't stand the sight. So you'd rather stuff your wounds into a relationship, disguise your fear as commitment, and hope nobody notices that your marriage is basically a hostage negotiation with flowers. But solitude, chosen solitude, is a furnace. It burns away illusions. It strips off the masks. And only in that fire do you meet your real self, the one you've been outsourcing to lovers, friends, parents, and even Instagram followers. Think about it. How much of your personality is actually you, and how much is just convenient branding so people will like you? Exactly. You think you're scared of being single? No, you're scared of being exposed. Alone, you can't hide. Alone, you hear the screams you've been drowning out with date nights and couple selfies. Alone, the silence roars. And in that roar, you discover truths you've spent your entire life running from. That's why solitude feels unbearable. It's not the absence of someone else, it's the presence of yourself. Now, why is this the best thing you can do? Because if you can survive your own presence, if you can sit in the raw chaos of your thoughts without crumbling, you become untouchable. No one can bribe you with affection. No one can blackmail you with abandonment. You stop negotiating your existence in exchange for companionship. That's freedom. And freedom terrifies people who've built their entire identity on being half of a couple. Look around. Couples aren't role models. They're hostages in coordinated outfits. They smile for photos, but behind closed doors, it's compromise after compromise, one dream killed here, one desire buried there. Slowly, their individuality is traded for harmony. And in the end, what's left? Two strangers clinging to a script society wrote for them. Grow old together. Translation, die slowly while pretending you're still in love. And don't give me that fairy tale garbage. Happily ever after is a marketing slogan, not a psychological reality. Real life is messy. Real growth is chaotic. Real freedom requires solitude. Do you honestly think you can become your truest self while constantly editing your moods, your habits, your ambitions, just to avoid conflict with a partner? Please. That's not love. That's emotional bureaucracy. History's greatest minds weren't built in couple counseling. Nietzsche didn't write "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" while planning a honeymoon. Tesla didn't invent electricity in between grocery lists with his spouse. Kafka didn't need a partner to validate his nightmares. They had solitude, and solitude gave them fire.
Meanwhile, most of you trade your fire for date nights at Olive Garden. No wonder your soul is suffocating. But let's be clear. Solitude isn't some Instagram aesthetic. Candles.
Bubble baths, self-care Sundays. No, real solitude is brutal. It's crying at 3 a.m. because your demons won't shut up. It's sitting in silence until your thoughts turn feral. It's doubting your sanity and still showing up for yourself the next morning. It's war. And yet, that war is sacred because it's the only battlefield where the prize is authenticity. When you master solitude, you stop looking for someone to complete you. You realize no one can. You don't show up in relationships as a half-empty cup begging to be filled. You show up overflowing. And if the other person leaves, you don't collapse. You remain whole. That's the difference between dependence and love. Dependence clings. Love chooses freely. And only the single, sovereign individual is capable of that kind of love. So here's the truth. Staying single is not a tragedy. It's training. Training to face the ultimate solitude, death, without flinching. Training to stop outsourcing your happiness to someone else's approval. Training to stand naked in your own truth, without collapsing. That's power. That's sovereignty. That's the only freedom worth having. Of course, the herd hates this message. They'll say you're selfish, broken, bitter. They'll pity you, warn you that you'll die alone. Cute. Guess what? Everyone dies alone. Even the married. Even the parents surrounded by children. Consciousness doesn't allow passengers on the final ride. So you might as well start practicing now. Better to meet death as someone who lived authentically than as someone who spent a lifetime negotiating their soul away for companionship. Let's stop sugarcoating it. Relationships are fine, but they're not salvation. They won't fix your wounds, they won't erase your loneliness, and they sure as hell won't give your life meaning. That's your job. And if you can't do it alone, you'll never do it with someone else. So why is staying single the best thing you can do? Because it's the only way to prove to yourself that you don't need anyone to validate your existence. Because it's the only environment where your creativity, your chaos, your truth can breathe without compromise. Because it forces you to face your demons until they bow, instead of hiding them under romance. And let's be brutally honest, solitude makes you dangerous. Society can't control someone who doesn't beg for love, who doesn't crumble when left alone, who doesn't trade freedom for validation. That's why they demonize being single. Not because it's sad, but because it's powerful. A free individual is a threat. A single individual who chooses solitude over illusions, that's a walking revolution. So yes, remain single. Not because you hate love, but because you refuse to settle for the counterfeit version society keeps selling. Not because you're broken, but because you'd rather bleed in truth than live in comfort. Not because you fear intimacy, but because you crave authenticity. In the end, the greatest act of love isn't finding the one, it's refusing to abandon yourself. That's the only commitment worth making, the only vow worth keeping. Everything else is just theater. Pretty theater, sure, but still theater. So if you have the guts, stay single. Choose the silence. Enter the fire. Face yourself. Because once you do, you'll never again be fooled into thinking that happiness wears a wedding ring.